The radio crackled with the kind of static that meant trouble was coming. Lieutenant Commander Kestrel Phantom Nakamura pressed her headset closer to her ear as she sat in the cockpit of her F-35 Sea Lightning II, engines humming with restrained power on the deck of the USS Gerald R. Ford. The carrier cut through dark Pacific waters, 90 miles off the coast of North Korea, where satellite imagery had detected something that made Pentagon analysts lose sleep. "Phantom, this is Overlord," came the voice of Admiral Hayes through the encrypted channel. "We've got a situation brewing that doesn't officially exist." 3 days earlier, a SEAL team designated Trident 6 had gone dark during a reconnaissance mission near Wonsan. Their last transmission was a burst of coded data that intelligence couldn't fully decrypt, followed by absolute silence. What they could decode was chilling. References to underground facility, massive construction, and most disturbing of all, American voices. The kind of detail that suggested captured personnel. The nightmare scenario that kept military commanders awake at 300 hours. The morning briefing had been classified beyond top secret. Satellite photos showed a mountain facility that hadn't existed 6 months ago, complete with sophisticated air defense systems, and what appeared to be a runway carved directly into granite. Intelligence suggested it was a weapons development site, possibly nuclear, but the SEALs had detected something else entirely before their communications went silent. Human experimentation. American prisoners. The kind of intel that demanded immediate action. Kestrel had earned her call sign Phantom, not through any dramatic dogfight or Hollywood moment, but through something far more valuable in modern warfare: the ability to slip through enemy radar undetected, strike with surgical precision, and vanish before anyone knew she'd been there. At 31, she was already legendary among naval aviators, though few knew her real story. The daughter of a Japanese-American mechanic from Monterey, she'd clawed her way through flight school despite instructors who questioned whether someone her size could handle the G-forces of carrier operations. Now, as dawn approached the Korean peninsula, Admiral Hayes was asking her to do something that had never been attempted: conduct a single-aircraft infiltration of the most heavily defended airspace in the world, locate and extract 8 Navy SEALs, and do it all without triggering World War III. The mission parameters were simple enough to be terrifying. No backup, no support, no margin for error. "Phantom," the Admiral's voice carried the weight of desperate hope, "you're our ghost in the machine. The SEALs said air power was silent when they needed it most. Time to prove them wrong." The morning sky stretched endlessly before her F-35, painted in shadows that would soon give way to the harsh light of dawn. In 12 minutes, she would launch into the darkness, carrying with her the lives of 8 men and the fragile hope that sometimes, just sometimes, one pilot could change everything. Kestrel Phantom Nakamura had spent her entire career being underestimated. Today, she would use that to her advantage. The engines of her Lightning II whispered promises of violence as she prepared for the most important mission of her life. In the distance, North Korean radar operators were about to learn why they called her Phantom. The carrier's catapult system charged with mechanical precision, ready to launch her into legend or oblivion. There was no difference between the two now. The pre-dawn darkness over the Sea of Japan held secrets that satellites couldn't penetrate, but as Kestrel ran through her final systems checks, she noticed something in the intelligence photo that the analysts had missed. The runway at the mountain facility wasn't just carved into granite. It was positioned at an angle that suggested whoever built it understood American tactics better than they should have. The kind of tactical awareness that came from inside knowledge, from someone who'd studied U.S. military doctrine intimately. Control, Phantom requesting final mission parameters. She transmitted as the catapult crew made their final preparations below her aircraft. "Phantom Overlord, your primary objective is reconnaissance and assessment. If you locate Trident 6, extraction is secondary priority. This is not, repeat, not, A rescue mission until we confirm what we're dealing with. The formal language couldn't disguise the truth. They were sending her into a situation so volatile that even the Pentagon was hedging its bets. 8 Navy SEALs were missing, possibly captured, and the military's response was to send one pilot in one aircraft to assess the situation. It was either the most brilliant tactical decision ever made, or the most catastrophic failure of command judgment in modern warfare. Kestrel's fingers moved across her controls with practiced precision, but her mind was elsewhere, remembering the conversation she'd had with her father 3 weeks ago during her last leave. He'd served as a mechanic in the Pacific Theater during the final years of his career, working on the same type of aircraft that had once carried nuclear weapons over Japan. Sometimes, he'd told her over dinner at their favorite sushi restaurant in Monterey, one person has to carry the weight of history. The question isn't whether you're strong enough, it's whether you're brave enough to find out. The intelligence briefing had revealed details that made her stomach clench with professional concern. The underground facility showed signs of American engineering techniques, construction patterns that matched classified U.S. military specifications. Either North Korea had somehow obtained detailed blueprints of American military installations, or they'd had help from someone who understood those specifications intimately. The implications were staggering. A mole in the Pentagon captured American engineers, or worse, willing collaboration. Phantom, you are cleared for launch. Weather conditions optimal, enemy radar activity minimal. Your flight path will take you through the demilitarized zone at Angels 25, then drop to nap of the Earth for final approach. The catapult officer below her aircraft raised his hand, waiting for her signal. In 90 seconds, she would be launched from the relative safety of the carrier deck into hostile airspace, flying a mission that existed in the gray area between reconnaissance and active war. Her F-35 stealth capabilities would keep her invisible to most radar systems, but if the North Koreans had somehow obtained advanced Russian or Chinese detection equipment, she'd be flying blind into a trap. The morning stars were fading as the eastern horizon began to show the first hints of dawn. Somewhere ahead, 8 Navy SEALs were either dead, captured, or hiding in terrain that offered no sanctuary. Her job was to find out which. Kestrel gave the catapult officer a sharp salute and felt the familiar surge of adrenaline as the steam-powered system engaged. In 2.5 seconds, she would go from 0 to 165 miles per hour, launched into the darkness by forces that could crush a human body if something went wrong. She'd done this hundreds of times, but never on a mission where failure meant starting a war. The catapult fired, and Lieutenant Commander Kestrel Phantom Nakamura became a ghost in the machine, streaking toward North Korea at dawn. The initial phase of the flight was routine: climb to cruising altitude, engage stealth systems, establish communications with the carrier group. But as Kestrel crossed into North Korean airspace 37 minutes after launch, her electronic warfare systems began detecting radar signatures that shouldn't exist. The North Koreans were using detection equipment that her intelligence briefing hadn't accounted for, sophisticated systems that could potentially track even stealth aircraft under certain atmospheric conditions. Overlord Phantom, I'm picking up radar emissions consistent with S-400 surface-to-air missile systems. Intelligence briefing indicated older Soviet-era equipment in this sector. Phantom, Overlord, confirm your assessment. Russian S-400 systems would represent a significant escalation in North Korean defensive capabilities. She adjusted her flight path, dropping to lower altitude where the mountainous terrain would mask her radar signature. The F-35's advanced avionics automatically calculated optimal routes through the landscape, but flying nap of the Earth in hostile territory required the kind of piloting skills that couldn't be programmed into computers. Every ridge line was a potential ambush point, every valley a trap that could funnel her into concentrated anti-aircraft fire. The landscape below was surprisingly beautiful in the early morning light, dense forests broken by agricultural valleys, mountain peaks shrouded in mist that would burn off as the sun climbed higher. It looked peaceful, almost pastoral, except for the concrete bunkers and radar installations that dotted strategic hilltops like mechanical scars on the natural terrain. Phantom Overlord. SIGINT intercept suggests increased radio chatter in your target area. Recommend extreme caution on final approach. The target area was 12 minutes away at current airspeed, but Kestrel was already beginning to understand why Trident 6 had gone silent. The facility wasn't just hidden in the mountains. It was integrated into the landscape in a way that suggested years of planning and construction. Whoever had built this installation understood both American surveillance capabilities and American tactical doctrine well enough to create something that could neutralize both. Her threat detection systems began registering multiple radar locks, brief electronic touches that suggested surface-to-air missile batteries were tracking her movement through the mountains. The stealth technology kept her invisible to most systems, but at her current altitude and airspeed, she was vulnerable to visual identification by ground observers. The GPS coordinates for the target facility appeared on her heads-up display, overlaid with topographical data that showed a massive underground complex with only minimal surface structures visible. According to intelligence estimates, the facility extended more than 300 feet underground, with multiple levels, and what appeared to be a sophisticated ventilation system. The kind of construction that required massive resources and detailed engineering knowledge. As she approached the target area, Kestrel noticed something that made her blood run cold. The surface structures showed signs of recent damage, scorch marks on concrete, debris scattered in patterns that suggested explosions, and what appeared to be impact craters from small arms fire. Trident 6 hadn't gone silent willingly. They'd been in a firefight. Overlord Phantom. Visual confirmation of battle damage at target site. Recommend immediate extraction preparation for any surviving personnel. The radio remained silent for long seconds before Admiral Hayes responded, his voice carrying the weight of command decisions that could start or end wars. Phantom, your mission parameters remain unchanged. Assess, evaluate, report. Do not, repeat, do not engage unless directly threatened. But as Kestrel circled the facility at altitude, her advanced sensors detected something that changed everything. Heat signatures consistent with human life, moving in organized patterns that suggested military discipline. 8 signatures, moving toward what appeared to be an extraction point. Trident 6 was still alive, still fighting and running out of time. The infrared display on Kestrel's console showed 8 heat signatures moving through dense forest approximately 2 kilometers from the main facility, their movement pattern suggesting tactical withdrawal under pressure. Behind them, larger groups of heat signatures were converging from multiple directions, a classic pursuit formation designed to drive fleeing targets into a predetermined kill zone. Overlord Phantom. I have 8 personnel moving in tactical formation, pursued by approximately 30 hostiles. Request immediate authorization for close air support. Phantom Overlord. Negative on close air support. Your mission parameters are reconnaissance only. Do not engage unless directly fired upon. The radio transmission carried the kind of political calculation that got good people killed. Somewhere in the Pentagon, generals and admirals were weighing the lives of 8 Navy SEALs against the risk of triggering an international incident that could escalate into nuclear war. The mathematics of modern warfare reduced human beings to acceptable losses and collateral damage statistics. But Kestrel had spent her entire career learning to read tactical situations that developed faster than command structures could respond. The heat signatures below were moving with the kind of disciplined precision that suggested highly trained special operations personnel, but their pursuers were closing the distance steadily. In approximately 12 minutes, the fleeing Americans would reach a geographic chokepoint where the terrain would eliminate any possibility of escape. She descended to lower altitude, using her aircraft's advanced sensors to map the tactical situation in detail. The pursuing forces were using military-grade equipment and moving in formations that indicated professional training rather than irregular militia activity. These weren't North Korean conscripts. They were elite soldiers who understood American tactics well enough to counter them effectively. The fleeing Americans had reached a river valley that offered temporary concealment, but led directly toward a mountain pass that would expose them to observation and fire from elevated positions. It was a tactical nightmare, the kind of terrain that turned 8 highly trained SEALs into sitting targets for anyone with high ground advantage and patience. Overlord Phantom. Friendly forces are approaching geographic chokepoint with hostile forces in pursuit. Recommend immediate extraction authorization. Phantom, stand by for updated mission parameters. The radio fell silent as politicians and generals conducted urgent conferences in secure facilities thousands of miles away, while 8 Americans moved steadily toward a trap that would kill them all. Kestrel checked her weapons systems automatically, though her rules of engagement prohibited their use except in direct self-defense. Her F-35 carried enough firepower to eliminate the pursuing forces in seconds, but using it would transform a covert reconnaissance mission into an act of war. The heat signatures continued moving toward the chokepoint, and Kestrel realized she was watching 8 men die in slow motion, unless someone made a command decision that prioritized lives over political considerations. In her headset, she could hear fragments of encrypted radio traffic as Trident 6 attempted to establish communications with any friendly forces in the area. Any station, this is Trident 6 actual. 8 personnel, immediate extraction required, coordinates follow. The transmission was broadcast on emergency frequencies, carrying GPS coordinates that placed them exactly where Kestrel's sensors indicated. They were alive, organized, and completely surrounded by hostile forces in terrain that offered no possibility of conventional extraction. Admiral Hayes' voice crackled through her headset with the kind of command authority that ended debates and started operations. Phantom Overlord, mission parameters updated. You are authorized for direct action to prevent capture of friendly personnel. Rules of engagement, weapons free for force protection. For the first time in her career, Lieutenant Commander Kestrel Nakamura had been given authorization to start a war if necessary to save American lives. The tactical situation below crystallized with military precision as Kestrel descended toward the combat zone. Her F-35 sensors painted a three-dimensional picture of the battlefield. 8 Americans moving through dense forest toward what they hoped was safety, 30-plus hostiles converging from multiple directions, and geographic terrain that would determine who lived and who died in the next 10 minutes. She switched to the emergency frequency and transmitted on the same channel Trident 6 was using for their distress calls. Trident 6 actual, this is Phantom. Navy F-35 providing close air support. Transmit your exact position and mark target priorities. The response came immediately, delivered in the calm professional tone that special operations personnel used when death was measured in minutes rather than hours. Phantom, Trident 6 actual. 8 personnel at coordinates 39.1847 north, 127.4331 east. We have pursuit forces approximately 400 meters south and closing. Request immediate fire support on marked targets. Kestrel's heads-up display automatically calculated attack vectors and weapon selection as she maneuvered into position for the first strike. Her aircraft carried a mixed loadout designed for precision strikes: AIM-120 AMRAAM air-to-air missiles, AGM-158 JASSM cruise missiles, and a 25 MGAU 22, a cannon for close support. Against infantry targets in dense forest, the cannon would be most effective while minimizing collateral damage. Trident 6 Phantom, I have visual on your position. Pop smoke for positive identification. Below, a green smoke grenade detonated in a small clearing, marking the Americans' position with chemical precision. Immediately, Kestrel could see the tactical problem. The SEALs were positioned in defensible terrain, but hostile forces were moving to surround them using multiple approach routes that would make traditional air support extremely difficult without risking friendly fire casualties. Phantom, Trident 6 Actual. We have wounded personnel requiring immediate extraction. Hostile forces are using advanced equipment and demonstrate knowledge of American tactics. Recommend you consider this a compromised operation. The implications hit her like physical force. A compromised operation meant enemy forces had detailed intelligence about American capabilities, possibly including real-time tactical communications. Someone had provided North Korean forces with information that allowed them to effectively counter U.S. Special Operations tactics. She selected her first target, a group of 8 hostiles moving through forest approximately 600 meters from the Americans' position, and armed the GAU-22 cannon. The 25 rounds would be devastatingly effective against personnel targets while minimizing risk to friendly forces. Trident 6 taking first target. Danger close, keep heads down. The F-35 dove toward the forest canopy at attack speed, its cannon system automatically calculating ballistics for the designated target area. At 1,800 feet altitude, traveling at 380 knots, Kestrel squeezed the trigger and felt the aircraft shudder as high-explosive rounds streaked toward the forest below. The impact was immediate and decisive. Her first strafing run eliminated an entire squad of pursuing hostiles and created a temporary gap in the encirclement that might allow the Americans to break contact and move toward extraction. But as she climbed away from the target area, her threat detection systems began screaming warnings. Someone below had just painted her aircraft with target acquisition radar from a shoulder-fired surface-to-air missile system. The kind of equipment that North Korean infantry forces weren't supposed to possess. Trident 6 Phantom. Be advised, hostiles are equipped with advanced SAM systems, taking evasive action. The missile launch came from her 3 o'clock position, a heat-seeking projectile that tracked her aircraft's infrared signature with the kind of precision that suggested Russian or Chinese technology. Kestrel deployed countermeasures automatically, chaff, flares, and electronic jamming, while throwing her F-35 into a violent evasive maneuver that pushed the aircraft's structural limits. The missile detonated approximately 50 meters behind her aircraft, close enough to rattle her teeth but far enough away to avoid catastrophic damage. Her systems showed minor damage to non-critical components, but the F-35 remained fully operational and combat-capable. More importantly, the missile attack confirmed what intelligence analysts had feared. North Korea had somehow acquired advanced military technology that significantly upgraded their defensive capabilities. Either through foreign assistance or other means, they now possessed weapons systems that could threaten even stealth aircraft under certain conditions. Overlord Phantom, taking SAM fire from advanced systems. Enemy forces are equipped beyond intelligence estimates. Recommend immediate escalation of force protection protocols. Phantom, Overlord. Continue mission. Additional support assets are being positioned but will require 45 minutes to reach your location. 45 minutes was approximately 43 minutes longer than Trident 6 could survive in their current tactical situation. Kestrel checked her weapon's status and fuel reserves, calculating how long she could provide close air support without compromising her own extraction from hostile airspace. Below, the 8 Americans were using the temporary respite created by her first attack to move toward better defensive positions, but hostile forces were already adapting their tactics to account for air support. Instead of pursuing in large groups vulnerable to strafing runs, They were dispersing into smaller units that would be harder to target without risking friendly fire. Phantom, Trident 6 Actual. We're moving to alternate extraction coordinates. Be advised, we have intelligence indicating this facility was constructed with American technical assistance. Recommend immediate investigation of potential security compromises at highest levels. The transmission carried implications that went far beyond a single special operations mission. If American personnel or contractors had provided technical assistance for the construction of this facility, it represented a security breach that could compromise operations across the entire Pacific theater. But those concerns were secondary to the immediate tactical problem. 8 Navy SEALs were surrounded by hostile forces in terrain that offered no conventional escape routes, and she was the only friendly asset within range to provide assistance. Kestrel selected her second target and dove toward the forest again, this time targeting a group of hostiles who were attempting to flank the Americans' position from the east. The war that wasn't supposed to start had already begun. Now she just had to figure out how to win it without triggering World War III. The second strafing run was more complex, requiring Kestrel to thread her attack between the Americans' position and hostile forces that were less than 200 meters apart. At combat speed, the margin for error was measured in microseconds. Too far left, and she'd miss the targets entirely. Too far right and 25, high-explosive rounds would detonate among the SEALs she was trying to save. Trident 6 Phantom. Danger close attack, mark your position with IR strobes. Phantom Trident 6, IR markers active. Her night vision systems immediately picked up the infrared beacons, 8 pinpoints of light that marked friendly positions with electronic precision. The hostile forces showed up as heat signatures on her thermal imaging, moving through forest terrain in tactical formations that suggested professional military training rather than irregular militia activity. She armed the cannon and dove toward the target area, her aircraft's computer systems automatically adjusting for wind speed, target movement, and ballistic trajectory. At 1,200 feet altitude, she squeezed the trigger and watched tracer rounds streak toward the forest below like deadly fireworks. The impact was devastating. Her second attack eliminated another squad of pursuing hostiles and created additional breathing space for the Americans, but it also triggered a coordinated response from enemy forces that demonstrated sophisticated command and control capabilities. Instead of panicking or withdrawing, the hostile forces immediately adapted their tactics to counter air attack. Phantom, Trident 6 Actual. Good effects on target, but be advised enemy forces are deploying additional SAM systems. Count 3 separate missile signatures converging on your position. 3 surface-to-air missiles launched simultaneously from different positions, creating a triangulated attack that would be difficult to evade using conventional countermeasures. Kestrel deployed every electronic warfare system her F-35 possessed, while throwing the aircraft into a defensive maneuver that pushed both machine and pilot beyond normal operational limits. The first missile detonated wide left, fooled by chaff dispensers that created false radar signatures. The second missile tracked her aircraft's heat signature, but was defeated by flares that burned hotter than her engines. The third missile, however, was equipped with more sophisticated guidance systems that couldn't be fooled by standard countermeasures. It detonated 30 meters from her aircraft's starboard wing, close enough to cause significant damage to non-critical systems, and send shrapnel through her right engine intake. Warning lights illuminated across her control panel as the F-35's computer systems automatically shut down damaged components and rerouted power through backup systems. Overlord Phantom, aircraft damaged by SAM impact but still operational. Enemy forces are equipped with advanced missile systems beyond intelligence estimates. Phantom Overlord, status of friendly personnel. Below, the 8 Americans were moving toward a defensive position in rocky terrain that would provide better cover from small arms fire, but would also make extraction extremely difficult. The pursuing hostile forces had adapted their tactics again, this time using the threat of additional surface-to-air missiles to limit her ability to provide close support. Trident 6 Phantom, what's your status and extraction timeline? Phantom, Trident 6 Actual. We have 2 wounded, 1 seriously. Current position provides defensive advantage but no extraction possibilities. We need immediate medical evacuation for our casualties. The tactical mathematics were brutal and simple. The SEALs could hold their current position against infantry attack for perhaps 30 minutes, but without medical attention, at least one of their wounded would die from blood loss. Any extraction attempt would require helicopter support, which would be vulnerable to the same surface-to-air missiles that had just damaged her F-35. Kestrel climbed to higher altitude and activated her aircraft's most sophisticated sensor systems, mapping every heat signature within a 5-kilometer radius of the Americans' position. What she found confirmed her worst fears. Hostile forces weren't just pursuing Trident 6. They were implementing a deliberate strategy to capture American Special Operations personnel alive. The tactical deployment below showed classic encirclement patterns designed to prevent escape rather than maximize casualties. The North Koreans wanted prisoners, which meant they had specific intelligence requirements that could only be satisfied through interrogation of captured American personnel. Overlord Phantom. Enemy tactical deployment suggests capture rather than elimination is primary objective. Recommend immediate extraction authorization before situation deteriorates further. Phantom standby. Extraction assets are 40 minutes out. 40 minutes might as well have been 40 hours. The wounded SEAL wouldn't survive that long without medical attention, and the tactical situation was deteriorating as additional hostile forces continued to arrive from the main facility. Her damaged F-35 could continue providing air support, but each attack run risked additional missile strikes that might force her to abort the mission entirely. In her headset, she could hear fragments of radio traffic from Trident 6 as they prepared defensive positions and treated their wounded. The calm professionalism in their voices couldn't disguise the reality. 8 highly trained special operations personnel were about to die unless someone made a decision that prioritized lives over political considerations. Lieutenant Commander Kestrel Phantom Nakamura had spent her entire career following orders and respecting chain of command. But as she watched American personnel prepare to die in foreign mountains, she realized that sometimes the right decision was the one that ended your career. She armed her remaining weapons and dove toward the forest one more time, this time targeting not just the pursuing forces, but the surface-to-air missile positions that threatened any extraction attempt. The radio crackled with urgent communications from Admiral Hayes. Phantom, you are not authorized for expanded engagement. Maintain current mission parameters. But authorization was a luxury that dead men couldn't enjoy. Kestrel switched to the emergency frequency and transmitted directly to Trident 6. Trident 6 Actual Phantom, I'm going to clear your extraction route. Mark your intended path of travel and prepare for immediate movement on my signal. She had just committed an act of military insubordination that would end her career, but 8 Americans were about to go home alive. The expanded engagement required Kestrel to attack multiple targets simultaneously, while avoiding return fire from sophisticated surface-to-air missile systems operated by personnel who clearly understood her aircraft's capabilities and limitations. It was the kind of tactical problem that existed at the intersection of aviation skill, electronic warfare, and pure combat instinct. Her first priority was eliminating the SAM sites that threatened any extraction helicopter, which meant identifying and destroying mobile missile launchers that were deliberately concealed in forest terrain. Using her F-35's advanced sensor systems, she located 3 separate launch positions and calculated attack vectors that would minimize her exposure to return fire. Trident 6 Phantom, I'm targeting SAM sites to clear extraction route. Stay in covered positions until I give all clear signal. The AGM-158 JASSM cruise missiles were designed for exactly this type of target, hardened installations that required precision strikes with minimal collateral damage. She selected the first SAM site and launched, watching the missile streak toward the forest below while she maneuvered to attack the second position. The explosion lit up the early morning sky as the first missile found its target, eliminating a Russian-made SA-24 surface-to-air missile system and its 3-man crew. Immediately, her threat detection systems registered the remaining SAM sites attempting to acquire target locks on her aircraft, forcing her into evasive maneuvers while she prepared the second strike. Overlord Phantom, engaging multiple SAM sites to facilitate friendly extraction. Request immediate helicopter support for wounded personnel. Phantom, you are not authorized for expanded engagement. Return to reconnaissance mission parameters immediately. But the tactical situation had evolved beyond mission parameters. The second cruise missile impacted its target with precision that eliminated another surface-to-air missile position, and her cannon system was already calculating ballistics for attacks on the remaining launcher and its supporting personnel. Below, hostile infantry forces were repositioning to account for the loss of their air defense assets, but they were also revealing their positions to her thermal imaging systems. What had been a covert pursuit operation was becoming an open battlefield, where American air power faced North Korean ground forces equipped with sophisticated weapons and tactical knowledge that shouldn't exist. Phantom, Trident 6 Actual, outstanding air support. We can see clear extraction route opening to our northwest. How long can you maintain coverage? She checked her fuel and weapons status. 15 minutes of loiter time remaining before she'd be forced to return to the carrier, and enough ammunition for perhaps 3 more sustained attacks. But the most critical factor wasn't her aircraft's capabilities. It was the medical condition of the wounded SEALs who required immediate evacuation. Trident 6 Phantom, I can provide coverage for 15 minutes maximum. What's the status of your wounded? Phantom, 1 urgent surgical, 1 walking wounded. The urgent surgical won't survive transport without immediate medical intervention. The mathematics of battlefield medicine were as brutal as the tactics. Without a medical evacuation helicopter equipped with surgical capabilities, the wounded SEAL would die from blood loss before reaching definitive care. But any helicopter operating in this area would be vulnerable to additional surface-to-air missiles that she hadn't located yet. Her threat detection systems suddenly registered new radar emissions from the main facility, not surface-to-air missiles, but air search radars that suggested North Korean Air Force assets were being scrambled to intercept her F-35. The tactical situation was escalating beyond a special operations extraction into potential air-to-air combat with unknown enemy capabilities. Overlord Phantom, detecting air search radar from target facility. Possible hostile aircraft launch imminent. Request immediate support. Phantom, Overlord, no support assets available for 40 minutes. You are directed to withdraw immediately to preserve aircraft and pilot. The order was tactically sound and strategically necessary, but it condemned 8 Americans to death or capture in hostile territory. Kestrel looked down at the heat signatures that represented Trident 6, moving slowly through forest terrain while carrying wounded teammates who couldn't travel at normal tactical speed. In her headset, she could hear one of the SEALs transmitting medical information to his teammates, using the calm professional language that special operations medics employed when describing traumatic injuries that required immediate surgical intervention. The wounded man was dying, and everyone knew it. Lieutenant Commander Kestrel Phantom Nakamura had reached the moment that defined military careers, the choice between following orders and saving lives. She armed her cannon one more time and dove toward the North Korean positions, knowing that this attack would probably be her last. The final attack run required everything Kestrel had learned about precision flying, tactical awareness, and combat decision-making during 8 years of naval aviation. Her damaged F-35 was operating at reduced efficiency, her ammunition was nearly exhausted, and hostile air defense systems were actively tracking her movement through increasingly accurate surface-to-air missile launches. But below, 8 Americans were carrying a dying teammate toward an extraction point that existed only in hope and tactical necessity. The wounded SEAL's vital signs were deteriorating rapidly, according to medical reports transmitted on encrypted frequencies, and without immediate surgical intervention, he would die within minutes rather than hours. Trident 6 Phantom, I'm making final attack run to suppress hostile positions along your extraction route. After this pass, I'll be out of ammunition and forced to withdraw. Phantom Trident 6 Actual, understood. We're moving to extraction coordinates now. Outstanding support, you've given us a fighting chance. She selected targets with the precision of a surgeon and the ruthlessness of a warrior. Hostile personnel positioned to interdict the Americans' movement, command and control elements coordinating the pursuit, and any remaining surface-to-air missile systems that threatened extraction helicopters. Her cannon system calculated ballistics automatically, but the actual targeting required human judgment that balanced military effectiveness against the risk of collateral damage. At 800 feet altitude, traveling at maximum safe airspeed for her damaged aircraft, Kestrel squeezed the trigger one final time and watched tracer rounds streak toward the forest below. The 25 high-explosive rounds detonated among North Korean positions with devastating effect, creating a corridor of destruction that would allow the Americans to reach their extraction point. But her attack also triggered the final surface-to-air missile launch, a sophisticated weapon system that tracked her aircraft through electronic countermeasures and struck her F-35's port engine with catastrophic force. Warning lights flooded her cockpit as hydraulic systems failed and flight control computers struggled to maintain stable flight with massive damage to critical aircraft systems. Overlord Phantom, aircraft critical damage, engine failure, hydraulic systems compromised. Attempting emergency return to carrier. Phantom Overlord, understood. Emergency recovery team standing by. Below, the 8 Americans were moving rapidly through the corridor she'd created, carrying their wounded teammate toward coordinates where a medical evacuation helicopter might be able to reach them. Her final attack had eliminated the immediate threats to their extraction, but it had also crippled her F-35 beyond safe operational limits. She climbed laboriously toward the Sea of Japan, nursing her damaged aircraft through flight regimes that pushed every system beyond normal parameters. The port engine was completely destroyed. Hydraulic fluid was streaming from multiple ruptures in her aircraft's control systems, and her flight computers were displaying cascade failures that indicated structural damage throughout the airframe. But 40 nautical miles ahead, the USS Gerald R. Ford was turning into the wind and preparing emergency recovery procedures for an F-35 that might not be controllable enough for a normal carrier landing. Her squadron mates were launching to provide escort and emergency assistance, while medical teams prepared to treat both pilot injuries and potential casualties from a crash landing on the carrier deck. Phantom, this is Viper. We're coming up on your starboard side for visual inspection of your aircraft damage. Commander Sarah, Viper. Rodriguez flew her F-35 into formation beside Kestrel's damaged aircraft, conducting the kind of battle damage assessment that determined whether a pilot had any chance of successful recovery or should eject immediately and hope for rescue. Phantom Viper, your port engine is completely destroyed. I can see multiple hydraulic leaks, and your port wing shows structural damage. Are you able to maintain controlled flight?" Kestrel tested her flight controls carefully, feeling the sluggish response that indicated her F-35 was barely controllable at current airspeed and altitude. Landing on a carrier deck required precision that her damaged aircraft probably couldn't deliver, but ejecting over the Sea of Japan carried its own risks in hostile waters where North Korean patrol boats could reach her position before American rescue assets. Viper Phantom: "I can maintain controlled flight at current parameters, but I don't know if I can make a carrier approach. How's the weather at the boat?" Phantom: "Weather conditions are optimal for emergency recovery. Medical teams are standing by, and the LSOs are ready for non-standard approach if necessary." 27 nautical miles ahead, the carrier flight deck was cleared for emergency operations, with rescue helicopters positioned to respond immediately if her landing attempt failed catastrophically. But more importantly, intelligence reports indicated that a medical evacuation helicopter had successfully reached Trident 6 and was transporting the wounded SEAL toward definitive surgical care. Her Insuber